The Keeping It Real with KC podcast. I, of course, am your host, KC Phoenix. And yeah, I'm doing this. I have got to work on my lighting. I bought one of those little ringy things, and I even have a second one. And I'm trying to find a good way to do the lighting, but whatever. So here we are with the Wrapped by Spotify. Spotify sent me this, and I just wanted to show it to you because this is my way of saying thank you. Like I said before, my podcast listenership is totally different from my YouTube channel. My viewers on my YouTube channel aren't necessarily always interested in the same thing that my podcast listeners like listening to, like lucky numbers, for instance. That seems to be popular on the podcast, but not on the YouTube channel. But I wanted to show you from the podcast side, and a huge thank you to all of my podcast listeners as well. And also thank you to my YouTube watchers and subscribers. I appreciate all of you. Any way that you consume the content, I'm always very appreciative of that. So it says, in 2022, you did your thing. The people loved it. And now going here, it did it. Oh, I have to go down. I was clicking up instead of down. So let's go down. All right. It says you created 9,104 minutes of new content. That's more than 99% of other creators in the society and culture category. I told you I work really hard on this podcast. And going to the next page, you can't hear us, but we're clapping right now. And it says, can you guess your number one? I already know what it is because I did this earlier. So yeah, it was the Aquarius reading. I was kind of shocked about that. My July 2022 Aquarius reading. So yeah, that seems to be the most popular episode of 2022. It says, got it. The Aquarius July 2022 tarot energy, 473% more streams than your average episode. And it says your podcast loves to travel. And it says it was heard in 32 countries. The top 5 were the United States, Canada, the Philippines. In its morning time, I guess I can say Maganda Umaga. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. For those who don't know, a little side story while we're talking. When I first moved back to Los Angeles, I was staying with a former friend of mine. I was staying with her mother. And my former friend is Filipina. So when I would stay there, she would teach me little things in Tagalog. And every time she explained something, I always asked her, I was like, okay, well, how do you say this? And she was older. So she was like, well, before the war, we said it this way. But after the war, that's always how it started out. But yeah, and even another story, I was talking about rice. And I was saying, like, I bought some rice. But there's obviously, 2 versions. Or actually, probably more than that. But I was saying I bought cooked rice. And that's why she couldn't understand me. Because I think it's Keenan for cooked rice or whatever. And then she's like, oh, no, it's bigas. It's like, I think Bigus. It's like bigas. That's what you got. She's like, that's uncooked rice. And I was like, oh, but yeah, maganda umaga is how you say good morning. I'm like 99% sure that's correct. So yeah. But anyways, on to this. So number 1, United States. Number 2, Canada. Number 3, Philippines. Number 4, Australia. And number 5, the United Kingdom. Shout out to all of those countries who have been listening to the Keeping It Real with KC podcast. Also shout out to the countries that were not mentioned here because it said 32 countries. I know some of the other ones like Brazil, Russia, and so on and so forth. Shout out to all of the countries that have taken time to listen to the podcast once or either have been longtime listeners. I sincerely appreciate it. So what else is next here? It says something magical happened between May 29th and June 4th. You had 46% more listeners compared to your average week. All right. And what are Keeping It Real with KC listeners like exactly? And it says, calculating listeners' personalities for those who can't see this. It says, your listeners' podcast personality is the adventurer. Your listeners' podcast personality is the adventurer. Your listeners venture out into the unknown, searching for fresher podcasts and gems yet to be found. So shout out to the adventurers out there. And then it says, you released 330 video episodes this year within Spotify. And it says they were in the top 15% of most viewed. You look great, by the way. And next it says, have you been working out? And it says your podcast saw a lot of gains this year. 193%. My listenership is up 193%. My followers are up 119%. My streams are up 93%. And the hours listened to in my podcast are up 28%, which is awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to everyone who has been listening to and supporting the show. And next screen, it says, you and your fans have something special. Even though I don't like the word fans, I say my Firebirds. Because my longtime supporters, I consider you Firebirds. It says, you're a top 10 podcast for 80 fans. Hold on. Let me go back and go down because the other ones didn't. So, top 10 podcasts for 80 fans. It says you're a top 5 podcast for 38 fans. And it says you're the number 1 podcast for 9 fans. Well, for those 9 fans, I'm your number 1 podcast. Shout out to you. Absolutely. And of course, shout out to all of my other Firebirds as well. But yeah, so top 10 for 80 of my Firebirds, top 5 for 38 Firebirds, and number 1 for 9 Firebirds. So that's awesome. And I'm over the moon with that. And then it says, Keeping It Real with KC, thank you for sharing your podcast with the world. Speaking of sharing, we made something special for you. And then it's these, where I can pick either or. It's like, for 2022, 607 episodes. 9.1K minutes, 32 countries, listeners up 193%. So yeah, it's just thank you to everyone. I really don't know what to say because it's so weird. I started this podcast years ago, and little by little, it's been growing and growing and growing. And I'm in the process of working on a second podcast. And that announcement will be coming soon. And the reason that I plan on being specific about what I'm doing with that announcement is because it will be 2 different personalities. It's sort of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I want to make sure that all my longtime Firebirds know what the deal is. So they're not like, if they ever come across the other podcast, they're not like, oh my God, I can't believe Casey said that. You know, I want to set the expectation is what I want to do. So that's why I plan on letting my listeners, after all these years, know about the second podcast that's coming out. And I'm not asking you to listen to the second podcast because, again, that podcast is going to be night and day. If you're an eclectic and you're into many, many things, okay, yeah, it might be for you. But I don't really foresee it being for a lot of my listeners on this podcast. But again, we all have free will, so you're more than welcome to listen to it once I finally get it up and running. I've started the groundwork stuff. Now it's just a point of wrapping other things up. But yeah, I just wanted to show you the Wrapped by Spotify to let you know I couldn't have done any of this without you. And I really, 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 really appreciate all the support. All right, so let me go ahead and get going. I have my day ahead of me and I got a ton of other things to do. KIRWKC.com, as you can see, main podcasting platform. This podcast is carried on Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. Until next time, everyone, be blessed.